Hi, welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the push and pull system. Now, I've already gone through all of the setting up your repository, connecting it to your repository here. We already went through all of that. But what we're going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be explaining to you how the push and pull system works. So in the last video, you can see here I still have the terminal open. We added a remote origin, which basically allows us to connect to our GitHub repository. You can see just like that, fetch and push. So now what we're going to do is actually talk about what that means, what fetch means and what push means and the origin, and we're going to talk about all of that in this video. So on my desktop here, I have the Git Workflow Diagram back open right here. So you don't need to worry about any of this part. We already went through all of that, learned how to do it. But what you really need to focus on now is these two, the local and remote repository and the links between them. So what are these arrows here? Basically what this is saying is there's a cycle. You can push and pull from a remote repository, kind of like a loop. So for example, you take all the information from a remote repository, you make changes onto it on your local machine, and then you push it and update the remote repository with the changes you've made. And you keep doing that in a cycle until you're done. So this is pretty much what we're trying to explain and do over the next few videos, is push to a remote repository, pull from it. We're trying to fetch information, do all of that. And for now, I just want to explain how all of this works. So when we typed git remote add origin here, what this basically did is told our repository that what's happening is we created a new remote repository at this URL. And this opens us to a whole lot of new opportunities with Git. So you can see here when you do git remote -v, it gives us these two links here, fetch and push. So fetch is pretty much pull. What this is saying is when we run a command, which we're going to introduce later, we're going to take information from this repository here on GitHub, which is the one we just created. And for example, let's just say that I want to pull some information from a repository that's not mine. Let's just say from the Linux repository. Now, I know there's issues with that and you're not actually allowed to pull from the Linux repository, but let's just say, for example, here. So if you go on GitHub right now and you search Linux, you're going to find the GitHub repo for Linux. I'm actually going to search it right here. Hold on. You have to make sure to search in all of GitHub and not just in your repository, because if you search here, you're just going to find Linux, or where you can find it in your repository. So right here, you can see this is the Linux source kernel. So right here, it has almost 783,000 commits. It's a lot of commits. But you can see that it says right here, pull request. So what does this mean? Pretty much what's happening is all of these people are asking to pull information from the Linux kernel onto their local machines. Now, it's not just necessarily their local machines. There could be many different ways you can pull to, but this is what it's saying here. Instead of this URL, it is the GitHub repo for Linux, and that is the fetch URL. So when you're trying to fetch something, it goes through GitHub, processes the pull request, and depending on the privacy and security of the repo and whoever created it, then you can either pull it directly or you'll have to go through some approval process, all sorts of things like that. So you can see here that a lot of people are trying to pull from the Linux kernel. So now let's talk about push. So push is directly from your machine. And now there's another URL here, which is the exact same, because again, we're trying to do a cycle for our repository. But what some people can do is, or what if you want, you can do, usually this isn't very found commonly, but sometimes it's people do it for many different reasons. But you can have one repository for pulling and one repository for pushing. This can be for a various amount of reasons, but usually that's not done. Because what we're trying to do here is create some sort of a cycle. So fetch is pulling the information from your repository, and push, I'm sure you can guess what that does. So again, running a similar command, we can push the information from our local repository and update the repository on GitHub or wherever hosting or shared server that you're running on. So you can see here that the push and pull cycle is really not that hard to understand. there's just a few commands that you need to know to be able to perform all of these tasks. And just what you have to take away from this video is that once you connect to a repository, you basically initialize this cycle of pulling and pushing information, continually updating it in a loop between your local machine and your remote repository. All right, let's move on.